All right, so in this video, we're going to look at how to make a graph. Now, a few housekeeping things. This from before, we're not going to be using it. It was just something I was setting up so we could see that. And also, just to help protect us from getting confused, I'm going to take these calculations we did that we really had no reason to do before except to learn how to do those calculations. I'm just going to move them one down so they're out of the way because this is the data we want to graph. We want to graph a graph of position versus time. Remember that position versus time, y versus x. So that data is right here. So I'm going to click and highlight all of that uh, and then come up here to insert, scatter plot, and we're always going to choose this bottom one. All right, so again, we're going to click on insert, and then over here where it says charts, we're going to click on this very first one. That'll bring up the graph that we want. Now you can already see, and you should always check this out before you go too deep into this. I look and my highest position is 55. I wanted position to be on the vertical axis on the Y, remember? That was what our title was, right? Position versus time. So if that's what I want to see that that biggest number, 55, was right here. It was the biggest dot we have, 55. And or you could also look at the time. The time's supposed to be on the horizontal, on the x-axis, and there's an 80, and there's an 80. All right, so that makes sense. This graph is correct. If it's not, this is the time to fix it. And I'll talk later about how to fix it. But since this is right, let's just keep moving on. So this plus sign up here, and sometimes this plus sign won't appear unless you click and move your graph a little bit. But this plus sign is going to be really what we use the most here. So it already has axis titles. Let's add, axes. It already has a chart title. Now we want to click on axis titles. We want all of this. And we're also going to want a trend line, but let's be very specific about the trend line. So let's use this small triangle, get this drop-down menu, and we're always going to select more options. From more options, linear is currently selected, and most of our graphs are going to be linear, but we might see a polynomial or a power. But let's stick with linear for this. We're going to always select these bottom two boxes. We're never going to select the box above it, though. So always select the bottom two, not the one above it. You can see automatically Excel calculates for us this equation, the slope, the y-intercept, and this r-squared value. Don't worry if you don't know what an r-squared value is yet. We'll talk about that later. So we didn't have to take out our calculators and calculate the slope, do a linear regression, figure out what the y-intercept is. It's already done for us. One thing to notice, and this can be a little awkward, when I clicked on these and created this equation, I then came over here and I clicked on the equation to move it. Watch what happens over here. See how it changed what it was doing up here? It changed the menu of what I was trying to do. So just be careful if that's what you do, that you go back and select this right window. So again, all I did is I clicked on here, and instead of trend line 1 equation, which allows you to format it, I just clicked on trend line 2, which gets me back here, or trend line 1 for that matter. But we don't need the second one. So actually, now that I say that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have that equation there for later, and you'll see why. Okay, so the chart title is just going to be position versus time. Notice I didn't bother to put units there. That is at a minimum. Some teachers like it to have more or less, but that would be good enough for me. On the y-axis, this will be position in meters. So notice this is just a text box. I clicked on it and I typed in position in meters, and that's what I'm going to get if I had spelled position right. There we go. Now, at the same time, if you didn't want to type it in, we can actually just click on this box and tell it we want to equal. Notice I typed in an equal sign and click here, time in seconds. it automatically fills this in, right? Because the equal sign tells it, make it be whatever is up here in this block. So there we go. Now it's formatted. So now at this point, we're going to want to change this equation. And we're going to change it in a very specific way every single time. The first thing we're going to do is we want to do what's called the three-step math model. We have the equation already, so that's step one. Step two, we're going to want to replace this y and x, because this y and x represents not just y and x where it doesn't have any meaning, but we want this y to represent position. We want this x to represent time, because that's what's on those axes. So we're going to click, again, this is just a text box, click on the y, and we're going to replace it with the word position or some abbreviation that represents that, not meters. Don't put meters there. All right. And in the same way, the slope, we're going to leave that alone for a moment. We're just going to change the x. The x represents time, so we're going to put time there, not seconds, okay? Not units, just the quantity, the variable that we're using. All right, so then the last step of the three-step math model will be taking these two values, and we want to go ahead and change them to have units. We want to add that to it. So this 24.5 is over here. It is the y-intercept, and that must be 20 to 30 meters. So 24.55 meters. So I'm going to label that. I'm going to put the units there so we know what that represents. In the same way, I'm going to put units for the slope. And maybe you remember from your math class, slope is change in y over change in x, or slope is rise over run. So those are the units we're going to use. We're going to use these units, whatever they are, divided by these units. So that will be meters per second. So there we go. Now that equation is formatted properly. Your teacher may or may not care about sig figs and may have you modify that. That's going to be up to your teacher, but this will set you up well no matter what the equation is. All right, so that's it for this video. In the next video, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at common ways to kind of fix those mistakes that may pop up.